1 year ago, life in D.C. took a drastic turn. Citing what he called a crime emergency, President Trump took the step of expanding the federal government's role in policing the nation's capital.
I'm announcing a historic action to rescue our nation's capital from crime, bloodshed, bedlam, and squalor, and worse.
National Guard troops arrived. Federal law enforcement surged into city streets. Thousands of our neighbors have been arrested, hundreds detained by ICE. Supporters called it long overdue.
And then we need National Guard, and which we did years ago. He brought it on. He's doing the right thing. Back up off of him. And Grandma said it.
Critics called it an occupation and assault on democracy.
Free D.C.
It's wrong. It's against the law. This is not a national emergency.
Wherever they think they can get a toehold, they're planting their foot, and we have to stomp on it.
The move ignited legal battles, political fights, and questions that reached far beyond crime. How has President Trump changed D.C.? Who are the people protesting his moves? Also, 1 year later, what now? Let's talk about it on this special edition of the D.C. Beat. And thank you for being here with us. I'm Lorenzo Hall. D.C. residents will never forget the summer of 2025. A city typically governed locally by our mayor and city council, suddenly taken over by the President of the United States. Well, this summer, President Trump is taking credit for D.C.'s plunging overall crime rate. According to D.C. police data, homicides are down 32% compared to the same period last year. 67 of our neighbors have been killed so far this year. Robberies are down 15%. However, assaults with a dangerous weapon are up 40%. In violent crime overall, 3%. The White House put out a statement saying the nation's capital is no longer a Democrat-run nightmare of murder and lawlessness. Violent predators, gangbangers, drug traffickers, and sex offenders have been removed from the streets. Homeless encampments cleared, parks reclaimed, crime driven toward historic lows. Now, D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser put out her own statement noting the drop in crime before Trump's so-called takeover. She calls ICE activity in D.C. and the National Guard presence problematic and says her North Star remains clear: protect home rule, protect D.C.'s autonomy, and protect D.C. residents. So many people have been asking, how did we get here? How was this even possible? Federal agencies have jurisdiction over some parts of D.C. We know that. And since D.C. does not have statehood, President Trump simply turned to Section 740 of the District of Columbia Home Rule Act. President Trump was able to take over the D.C. police force with such ease because of President Nixon. Section 740 of the D.C. Home Rule Act gives the president emergency control of D.C.'s police force, but only for a short time. The D.C. Home Rule Act was signed into law by Nixon on December 24, 1973. Under Home Rule, D.C. can elect its own mayor and city council, but Congress has the final say on spending and local laws. D.C. residents still don't have voting representation in Congress. Now, in the late 1960s, Nixon ran on a law and order platform during a surge in crime. He needed to prove he was tough, so he used D.C. as a stage, a majority black city, even passing a D.C. crime bill through Congress before approving Home Rule. Nixon and some federal leaders wanted Section 740. Why? Well, the heroin epidemic, political unrest after Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s assassination, the Vietnam War protests, and riots, including here in D.C. Nixon didn't trust local leaders to handle violent crime, and he wanted the power to step in if unrest came too close to the White House. So for years, we know President Trump talked about taking over D.C. primarily because of graffiti and crime. Prior to the federal surge, crime was already dropping in D.C. For instance, in 2024, according to D.C. police data, total violent crime was down 35% from the year before. This change happened after the D.C. Council passed emergency crime legislation in 2023 and then the massive Secure D.C. crime bill in 2024, which made it easier to detain suspects ahead of trial, stiffer penalties for crimes, and greater police powers. However, that didn't matter. Two incidents mid-summer of 2025 really got the president's attention. You remember, first 21-year-old congressional intern Eric Tarpinian-Yakum was shot and killed on June 30th in Northwest D.C. The three teens in that case are set to face trial next year. Then two teens, a 15-year-old boy and 15-year-old girl, assaulted a Department of Government Efficiency staffer on August 3rd in Northwest D.C. President Trump posted pictures of Edward Korenstein on his Truth Social account and threatened to take federal control of the city if it, quote, didn't get its act together. Then he said this at a press conference on August 6th of last year.
Are you considering taking over the D.C. police? Is that an option on the table?
We're considering it, yeah, because the crime is ridiculous. I could show you a chart comparing D.C. to other locations, and you're not going to want to see what it looks like. It was just up on television, actually, they were showing it. Now, we want to have a great, safe capital, and we're going to have it. And that includes cleanliness, and it includes other things. We have a capital that's very unsafe. You know, we just almost lost a young man, beautiful, handsome guy that got the hell knocked out of him the night before last. And I'm going to call him now. We wanted to give him a little recovery time. We just put a call into him. They're calling back in a little while, but he went through a bad situation, to put it mildly, and there's too much of it. We're going to do something about it. So whether you call it federalized or what, and that also includes the graffiti that you see, the papers all over the place, the roads that are in bad shape, the medians that are falling down, the median in between roads that's falling down. We're going to beautify the city. We're going to make it beautiful. And what a shame. The rate of crime, the rate of muggings, killings, and everything else, we're not going to let it. And that includes bringing in the National Guard, maybe very quickly, too.
And do you want Congress to look at overturning the D.C. Home Rule Act?
We're going to look at that. In fact, the lawyers are already studying it. We have to run D.C. This has to be the best-run place in the country, not the worst-run place in the country. And it has so much potential, and we're going to take care of it. You're going to be safe. You're going to be safe walking down streets. You're not going to get mugged.
Now, here's how Mayor Bowser responded to the president's comments a few days later, saying there is no need for the National Guard to patrol D.C.
They're not law enforcement officials. These are men and women who leave their families to serve our country, and that is just not their primary role, to enforce local laws. So I'm concerned about that. We do need the federal government's help, as I mentioned, because they have an outsized influence on our criminal justice system. We need more prosecutors. We need more judges.
Okay, so from there, things escalated quickly. It was no longer just talk from the president. A day after Mayor Bowser's comments you heard right there, on Monday, August 11th, President Trump had a big announcement to make at the White House, shocking D.C. leaders and residents. Here's Eric Flack.
It's becoming a situation of complete and total lawlessness.
Day one, August 11th, President Trump declares a crime emergency in the district, invoking a rarely used provision of the D.C. Home Rule Act, placing the Metropolitan Police Department under federal control, sending in waves of federal law enforcement officers, and activating the National Guard. There were about a half dozen FBI agents that were supporting MPD in this traffic stop. The FBI agents actually covered their faces once they saw our cameras start rolling. Day 4, August 14th, U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi puts the head of the DEA in sole command of the D.C. Police Department. Day 5, August 15th, D.C. Attorney General Brian Schwab goes to court and successfully blocks that move to take control of MPD. But the impact of the federal forces, especially a crackdown from ICE, is beginning to strike fear in some pockets of the community. Agents now stopping people randomly they suspect of being in the country illegally and arresting those without criminal histories beyond their status.
As soon as we're done conducting our investigation, we'll be able to fill you guys in.
That same day, the president orders federal forces to clear out homeless encampments around the city. This despite the mayor's office saying they already started the process days before, as restaurants and bars complain the increased law enforcement presence is hurting business. Day 14, August 24th, National Guard members are seen around the district carrying their service-issued firearms. Daily updates from MPD show crime numbers in the district are down. Still, protests mount against what some call the federal occupation of D.C.
We're here today because we want to send a clear message to this administration that we want them to stop harassing and intimidating the people of Washington, D.C.
Day 23, September 2nd. Mayor Bowser issues an order saying D.C. will continue to coordinate with federal law enforcement working in the city indefinitely. Day 25, September 4th, Attorney General Schwab files his second lawsuit against President Trump, this time seeking to end what he calls the illegal deployment of the National Guard in D.C.
Mayor Bowser better get her act straight or she won't be mayor very long, because we'll take it over with the federal government, run it like it's supposed to be run.
Yes, so President Trump continued to put pressure on Mayor Bowser and D.C. well beyond the expiration of his emergency order. So here's what's changed in D.C. The National Guard remains. They will likely be here until the end of Trump's term, January of 2029, which is estimated to cost $1.4 billion. Their presence has been challenged in court and deemed unlawful, but the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals paused that ruling because the president, as we know, has unique powers here in D.C., so that challenge is in legal limbo right now. In the meantime, we know multiple studies have been conducted, all showing the National Guard presence in D.C. has had no effect on violent crime. Right now, there are more than 4,600 troops in the city, primarily supporting America 250 events. For the last year, we've seen them picking up trash on patrol in parks, neighborhoods, and metro stations. The Guard is defending their presence and work. Here is Brigadier General Leland Blanchard.
Our guardsmen have provided 788 medical assists, ranging from administering CPR to tourniquets for gunshot victims and a whole range of medical assistance. We've reunited 43 lost children with families, supported law enforcement 479 times in the course of their duties, intervened in 262 altercations before they further escalated, and the team has administered Narcan to 325 different individuals over the course of this last year. And of course, those are not simply numbers. Those are not just data points. Each of those are fathers, mothers, children, people who have received emergency care, returned to parents, to their families. These are lives saved from opioid overdoses. Violent situations brought under control before permanent damage was done.
Here's what else has changed. Ward 1 has one of the largest Latino and immigrant communities in D.C. That area was the target of ICE enforcement and is still recovering. From Trump's inauguration on January 20th through August 10th, ICE arrested 143 people in D.C. with no criminal record or pending charge. This is all according to data obtained by the Washington Post. Well, in just 2 months following Trump's order, there were 932 arrests in D.C. So we know ICE is no longer working alongside MPD, but other federal agents like Border Patrol are still part of roll call and doing patrols with D.C. police. At MPD, the interim chief tells me this partnership is necessary. Jeffrey Carroll took over after Chief Pamela Smith stepped down months after the surge. Last year, the House Oversight Committee and the Justice Department released reports accusing MPD of manipulating crime data. This happened after President Trump made the claim. One report says commanders pressured officers to classify crimes as less serious offenses. Well, months later, Smith resigned, denying those allegations on her way out the door. Here's what she said during her farewell speech.
So I'm going to the Bible when I say this to my haters. F you. I forgive you. I never, and never will, and never would have encouraged, intimidated, retaliated, or told anyone to change their numbers. The same folks who said in that report that they changed their numbers, and I did not. The report is very clear. I did not direct anyone. You should investigate those folks.
All right, so the Trump administration is touting hundreds of arrests, but what happens after? U.S. Attorney for D.C. Jeanine Pirro is having a tough time winning trials and getting grand jury indictments in several high-profile cases, including the one involving this man here, Sean Dunn, who went viral and became known as the Sandwich Guy. The 37-year-old former Department of Justice paralegal was arrested after tossing a Subway sandwich you see there at a federal agent at the start of the federal surge. Pirro tried to charge him with a felony. A grand jury refused to indict him, so Pirro's office went for a misdemeanor simple assault charge. He was found not guilty. Part of the problem in heavily Democratic D.C. is the jury pool not trusting her office and the Trump administration. On Fox News, a month after the surge began, Pirro said D.C. jurors are out of touch.
The fact that they're so used to crime, that crime is so normalized in D.C. that they don't even care about whether or not the law is violated is the very essence of what my problem is in D.C.
So we have seen the D.C. jail population reach record highs this year. I looked at some of the most recent data, and on average, more than 2,200 people were held at D.C. Department of Corrections facilities in June, the highest level in more than a decade. The courts have a backlog right now, leading to longer case processing times. This increase began before the surge, but jumped significantly over the last year. You know, with officers making more arrests with federal agents, long after the surge, D.C. residents are still questioning this collaboration, especially after the death of a D.C. man, Julian Bailey. He was shot and killed by U.S. Marshals earlier this year, and his family is still waiting for answers.
On today, it's very hard. I don't know what this emotion is, because I'm upset. I'm hurt.
This D.C. woman says today she was supposed to be celebrating her 5-year wedding anniversary.
I'm not even getting on social media today because, you know, Facebook will remind you of a good day. I don't even want to see the pictures. They hurt.
Instead, Trinice Wells Bailey is trying to figure out why her husband, 43-year-old Julian Bailey, was shot and killed by a U.S. Marshal more than 5 months ago in D.C.'s Mayfair neighborhood.
I just need to know because I'm not one of those people. If he did wrong, please, so that we can heal in that way. You know what I mean? But if he didn't, why did you do this? Because now it double hurts. It double hurts. Because one, you took someone from me that I love. You took someone from our children, his children.
According to D.C. police, officers got a call about a man who was armed and threatening a woman at a nearby convenience store. U.S. Marshals overheard the call on D.C. police dispatch and located Bailey. From there, the police report simply says a shooting occurred involving a deputy U.S. Marshal.
No one should be able to get away with killing anybody. No one. Everyone should have the opportunity to stand before a judge.
Wells Bailey says she recently received her husband's autopsy and toxicology reports. They show Bailey had PCP and alcohol in the system, but it's not clear if that was from recent use. The autopsy also found he was shot 9 times, with most of the wounds in the back.
To remember, did it hit him like this?
Did it hurt him like this? Or what was he thinking? Did he hurt? Did he think about me? Did he think about the girls?
Marshals were patrolling the area as part of President Trump's law enforcement surge in D.C. MPD says its officers were not present during the encounter. The U.S. Marshals involved were wearing body cameras, according to the agency, but that video has not been released.
Why are the U.S. Marshals here? You know, that's one. Why are they answering calls that they shouldn't be answering? You know, you're supposed to be after people if they have warrants, things like that. Not a regular 911 call. So they should not have even been involved, because I truly believe that they weren't involved. I would have saw my husband again that night.
The U.S. Marshal Service told me they have no comment. The U.S. Attorney for D.C.'s office says the investigation is ongoing.
D.C. is our home, and Trump can't have it.
One of the biggest changes we've seen this year is the number of D.C. residents taking part in protest to challenge the Trump administration's efforts here in D.C. More than likely, you've seen the T-shirts, hats, and signs that read Free D.C. So how was Free D.C. formed? 3 D.C. women who say they knew this was coming and mobilized well before President Trump was sworn in a second time. When I met up with Nene Taylor, Alex Dodds, and Kaya Chatterjee, they just wrapped up another planning session. This one, they say, was focused on their next move to stay ahead of President Trump. Free D.C., now that may sound familiar to longtime D.C. residents because it was former Mayor Marion Barry's rallying cry when he was fighting for control of D.C. as a civil rights leader.
Free D.C. was a name that we chose, and for me, because of our ancestors, because Marion Barry started Free D.C., and D.C. is not free. It seems like we're free, but we're enslaved by Congress. And so reality is that me and Alex was already doing, if you heard the term hands off D.C., where we were already fighting Congress because they had overturned a legislation from D.C. And Kaya had this wonderful idea where she fed us like, no, this is what Trump is coming to do to DC, and she's, brought about fascism and dictatorship. And we looked at that and we was like, yeah, you right. And so we took the work of her knowing, fighting against, and knowing the history and knowing the knowledge of how to fight against a fascism country and a dictatorship. And we knew that we couldn't keep going up Congress with the handful of people we had with hands off DC, because it was just a little bit of us. And so we built the people power, and she told us that we're gonna need 24,000 people for our army to be able to fight back against Congress and Trump. And so we built and got together and spoke to our elders who actually held the work of Free DC before, and got permission to carry on the legacy of Free DC. And and we're gonna get this people power, and we're gonna get our 24,000 people, and we know that we're going to Free DC, and Trump and the Congress gonna lose, and eventually we're gonna protect DC home rule, and DC is gonna become a state.
Did you ever think it would get to this point, what we're seeing right now?
Yeah, I think everything that this president has done is something that we anticipated or just were worried would come to pass. And we really weren't alone. I mean, right after the election, I think it was 2 days after the election, a massive community meeting of, I would say, 1,000 people were together in a church collectively trying to answer this question and to figure out how DC was going to organize in order to respond to the threat that this president poses. Everything that he has done since then is something that other authoritarian style leaders in other countries has done as they try to consolidate power. And so in many ways, it's things that we expected. We're not surprised by, but it's still, terrifying and horrible to live through and witness.
DC has always been over-policed. And so it's kind of harder for us to fight against the feds, because DC is not a state. And what Trump done was gave them more power. So we can't tell park police you don't have a right to stop someone on a park, and we can't tell you as marshals you can't come and get this person that has an outstanding warrant, because that's their job. But what happened is they've been empowered, even with more power, to get these numbers up. And the reason to get the numbers up is bigger than the court system. It's something that we know that Trump is trying to do in the long run, which is to become president again. And actually DC, which I feel—
You think that's his goal?
100% his goal is DC would be his kingdom. And this is why I always tell people on a national level, pay attention to DC, because DC is the nation's capital. When we say the national capital, is Trump's kingdom, where he wants to rule the whole United States, and he's going to run it from DC. So as you see all these things he's doing in DC, it's what they're doing in other countries. He wants to be the king, and DC is going to be his castle if we don't fight back. So this is bigger than what people are seeing, the numbers with the courts. The cases are being dismissed, but it's a reason that they're doing it to show we locked this many people up, but they're not giving you the numbers of the people that's been dismissed on no paper. You're just getting the numbers that so many people got locked up, because that's the number you're given. So with that being said, it's hard for us to fight against the federal part of policing, but the National Guards, that's something that we can fight, and there's a reason for the National Guards to be here.
I think the goal of having them here is to normalize them for a larger presence. There's one armed soldier in DC for every 150 people. They're from many, many states. It is not Trump's decision to deploy most of these guard. He does control the DC Guard, but mostly this is governors, sometimes Democratic governors, that are making this decision. They're being bribed, they're being bullied, they're being misled, and it's giving us an opening to understand who are these people. Some of them are going to try to run for president after this, and now we know they're people who are really easily bribed, and so it's exposing people, and we are actually making it backfire on them politically as they do this back at home, because most of these places are places that have their own disasters at home, and that's what the National Guard is supposed to be doing. doing, is helping people when there's a disaster. They're not supposed to be deploying the U.S. military domestically. Our argument is that this is an illegal deployment. That is the Attorney General's argument. It is what a judge found, Judge Cobb. We believe that it is an illegal deployment and that these governors are participating in an illegal deployment. And so we have leverage, honestly, because these governors have constituents who also aren't happy about this. But I think that ultimately Trump wants to turn this into a kingdom, to Nini's point, whether you're looking at the golf course or the arch or the ballroom. That's stuff on federal property. If he had it his way, like any dictator, he would want to take the whole Capitol. But unfortunately for him, we live here and he can't have it. And that's been our assertion from the beginning. On August 11th of 2025, we stood together on Black Lives Matter Plaza with faith leaders, with union leaders, with so many leaders from across DC, and we said, here's the plan, DC. And we told people on social media and in person what we were going to do, and people did it. And we collectively should be really proud of ourselves in DC. We showed up for jury duty and we didn't indict people. We walked other people's kids to school. We made sure that we did not normalize this. We made it, we kept organizing. We had 200 people standing at all our polling locations to chase armed military figures away from our polling locations, which some of our volunteers had to do. And we did all that because we came together and we did it. So it has been a harrowing year, so many lockups. 7 out of every 1,000 children in DC has had a parent abducted, 20,000 immigration-related arrests regionally, another 13,000 here. All these Fourth Amendment violations that are happening every day, like just illegal search and seizure. The arrests are all illegal. It's been a harrowing year, but also I think we should be really proud of ourselves that after the year that we have had, what we saw in this election and what we see in every neighborhood of DC is defiance. We know that this guy is desperate and sad because he's losing popularity everywhere, because everything is too expensive and nothing works anymore. And that desperation leads him to try to cling on to power. And what that looks like is abusing us in DC. I think people in DC see this for what it is, the act of a desperate wannabe dictator. And we are maintaining a sense of community and defiance that I know I'm really proud of.
Mm-hmm. One of the real fundamental principles of Free DC is that no one is coming to fix this except the people. It's going to be the people who fix this.
A lot of our neighbors are using this week to reflect on the last year. One community activist who goes by Afeni Evans is remembering the outset of the federal surge. With more police patrolling the streets, she was helping children get home during city-imposed youth curfew hours and was arrested as well as pepper sprayed, accused of using a kids ride free card on Metro, which is fare evasion. Evans said this was one of the most traumatic experiences of her life. Her charges were dropped.
I want people to know that this is a fascist takeover of DC and that our youth are going to be directly impacted by this.
Get out of the way!
It doesn't matter about me. I will be fine. Our kids will not be.
Yep, that's me. And this is me right before that, being pepper sprayed and brutally arrested by Metro Transit Police for the crime of standing up against the harassment of DC's youth. And after 18 hours of being covered in pepper spray and sleeping with the DC jail cockroaches, my community showed up for me.
Still, a year later, a group of DC residents is making their voices heard in a unique way. So every day at 7 p.m., residents at the residences at Thomas Circle, they bang their pots and pans along Massachusetts Avenue in protest of the federal surge. They also hang flags from their balconies as a show of resistance. Residents say the demonstration is about more than the surge. It's also about protecting DC's autonomy and pushing for statehood. You know, this last year has changed our home for sure. So I want to end on a high note, though. For me, The bright spot has been seeing all of my friends and you, my neighbors, truly engaged in what is happening in the city. We had a historic primary election where we saw candidates and voters passionately voicing their plans and vision for the DC they would like to see in the future. So we know this is not over yet, so get involved, get to know your neighbors, and let's lean on each other right now. I know it's a lot, but don't forget to find the beauty in each day. There's plenty of it we know in DC. That's why we love this city so much. That does it for this edition of the DC Beat. Thank you so much for giving me some of your time. Truly the greatest gift. I'll see you back here next Wednesday.